it's Kelly Folsom here, and I want to welcome you back into my studio today for another Vital Art session. I am so excited for today's painting. Don't you just love painting? It just gets better and better and funner, even though I don't think funner and funner is a word. Anyways, today we are going to be doing a looking down perspective. So the still life is below our eye level, my eye level. I'll be looking down on it. And you'll notice a difference in that. We're going to see a lot more tabletop plane, a lot more of the top planes of the objects, which is different from the eye level still lifes. Today we have a really gorgeous kind of Dutch-inspired pedestal fruit bowl, kind of oozing out of the shadows, loaded with grapes and bright, colorful fruits. This is going to be amazing. And with a lovely, graceful curve of fruit coming out onto the tabletop plane as well. So let's dive in and get started. Okay, my friends, welcome back. Let's get this going. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm just going to quickly kill the white of the panel here. Just so you know, I always use an 8x10 for these lessons so that I can get far enough along, get a little bit of detail for you guys, but that does not mean that you have to use 8x10, right? So you can do any size that you want. You can take as long as you want on these lessons. The most important part for me as an instructor, I feel, is to give you guys the big ideas, all the fundamentals, and get you started on the right path. Because you can always go bigger, add more, or even go simpler if you want to, simpler and smaller if you want to. And if you can get the fundamentals and understand the fundamentals, then, you know, the details, putting in more details becomes easier, the easier part. So painting is really not about detail and how much detail you can put in. It's really about understanding those larger concepts and those larger fundamentals like form and value and, you know, composition. So that's really what I aim to give you. So no matter how far along we get today in this a little bit more complex setup, you will get started off on the right foot for sure. Okay, so this is, as I said, a looking down still life. My star of the show, I'm doing this horizontal, but I could also see you doing it vertical if you wanted to as well, because the pedestal bowl is vertical. Okay, so I'm just starting out with like this backwards C shape of, you know, the grapes and the apple here spilling out on the table. And then I really just want to get a basic shape down with my raw umber here and my medium, just kind of a triangular shape of fruit on top of this pedestal bowl, which I think is so beautiful. And I really wanted to do kind of this Dutch-inspired, everything sort of oozing out of the shadows back here, right? So most of the bowl is in shadow, or at least a third to half of the bowl is in shadow, and then we start to see some light on that top green apple, which is, you know, just super dramatic. Okay, usually on tabletop too, you will see some cast shadow on the tabletop plane as well. That's pretty traditional to do. And you really want to think of your shadow almost like watching a stage or a play, you know, where they throw a lot of the scene perhaps into shadow, and then they shine a spotlight on the thing that is really, really what they want you to be looking at. So it's kind of a similar idea. And now that I'm seeing this, I think, you know what, we need to kind of scooch this over. I'm just going to scooch it over just a bit. I think we need more shadow on this side. I had it placed a little close to the left. And so that's also the beauty of just doing massing, is that instead of line drawing, is that you can really quickly kind of shift something over. So just so that we can kind of see what's happening here, because right now it's just, you know, raw umber on raw umber. I'm just going to wipe out for the light that is on some of these fruits. I'm going to be careful not to go too big, which I might be doing already, but there we go. And we've got this other fruit over here, this other apple, but it's all in shadow. So I really just want to frame out the two fruits that are in light. And then of course we've got this fruit down here. Just kind of draw that shape in right now, and then more clearly draw in this shape for you just so that you can see it better for the pedestal bowl. So it's just kind of like a curve in this way, curve in this way, and then flaring and tapering out like that. Now most of this bowl is in shadow, but just to kind of, again, just so that you can see it more clearly where I'm going, I'm just going to wipe out just to get the value contrast around that bowl. And that is really like as much drawing as, I might want to do here. Just really big, simple shapes. So then just this little shape for the lemon here, wipe away some of this tone for the apple. And then let's mix up some grape color because we have so many grapes in here. So I'm going to do black, alizarin crimson, a little tiny touch of that Venetian red is what I have on the palette today. If you have cadmium red, that will work as well. So whichever red you have will work, okay? I just want like a really rich, maybe I'll do a little ultramarine in there too, just to get it a little more purple. I just want a really rich, deep crimson-y red color here. And really my background color is going to become very similar to this as well. Okay, and then we have more over here, so we're just going to, and that really kind of frames out the apple and the lemon slice, putting an extra layer of depth of space back there, little grape here, little grape in front of the lemon slice. Another little grape over here, and you could even add more, in the scene if you wanted to. Now, that really comes under this apple. So we can carve out our shape a little bit better. These come in front of this lemon, curving in front, so I really want to make sure that I get that overlap as well. Okay, and then really capturing that like curve over the edge. I'll just go ahead with the back of my brush and carve out where some stems are going to be. Okay, and then we need background color next. Okay, so and that's going to be very similar to the color that I have in the grapes, just a little bit duller. So I really kind of wanted to play off the yellows against the purples in this painting. So I'm going to do black, Venetian red, alizarin crimson. And you can see how strong that Venetian red is. So we need a lot more of the black and crimson in there. Actually, between blue and crimson. There we go. I want it to be a little bit more brown. You can see that that's a little darker and more purple from the grape color. My shadow color over here. Oh, it looks like I picked up a booger and it's scraping my, a booger is just like a little dried piece of paint that if you get one, there it is. It tends to scrape into the surface. So you will want to remove that if you get something like that because it will continue to be a thorn in your side. Okay. So all of this is very close in value on purpose to really get that like traditional kind of chiaroscuro mystery, so the values the value and the color is going to be very close relationship. Not exactly the same, but very, very close. Okay, while I have that on my palette, I'll just put that in instead of the raw umber for cast shadows that are on the ground plane. And underneath the objects, because the cast shadow color is always related to the object that it's on. In this case, just kind of a rich, warm, reddish-brown environment. Okay, then I am going to lighten this a little bit. For the light, with a little bit of white, you can see how quickly and cold that goes. So I'm going to add in a little bit more color, but I do need the white for it to look more lit up. So I'm putting in a little bit of raw umber there. Let's see what that gets us. Just so that it's a little bit cooler and a little bit lighter than the cast shadow. A little more red too, why not? And I think I can probably go darker on that cast shadow on that left side too, just to get a little more contrast. But backgrounds, it's one of those things that you don't know until you get enough on there, so you're always kind of making your best judgment at the time. So I'm going to do a little more white, a little more yellow ochre here, because that white will make it go kind of chalky, and I want to maintain like a kind of a rich wood color. So adding back in color with the red and the yellow ochre. But you have to get enough of your background color in. That's why we do this more in the early stages, because it really sets the color tone and the mood of the painting. So you need enough of it. You don't have to get all of it, but you do need enough of it. So as you can see, I'm just going a little bit lighter and also giving maybe a little extra oomph of color there. And I think just to take this a little bit darker, I'm just going to paint some straight black, ivory black, and mix it in wet into wet back here. Just to go a little bit darker. I want a little more drama there. And I love this angle of cast shadow. I use those light blockers, to throw those shadow boxes that are on your material list, to throw a really beautiful cast shadow. So really on the grapes, I just want like the highlight and the glow that will be through the grapes to be what shows through. Okay, so now I'm just going to add in a little bit of Cad Yellow Deep here to get like my shadow color on green apple. You can see now that I've got this green apple kind of at the wrong angle, so I'll just go back to my background color. This is why it's a good idea to have enough of it mixed up and left on your palette. And this is just a really nice, simple curve to show the form of that green apple. And also on the yellow lemon, we can also do pretty much the same color. We don't have to show a lot of color differences between, those are so similar color families. And then for the dark red, we kind of need to go back to that grape color, just not quite as dark. So alizarin crimson, the Venetian red, and this time instead of black, I'm just going to use some raw umber to kind of neutralize and go a little bit darker. Definitely more in the red family though. For this apple, the red part of the apple that's in shadow. And then same thing on the underside here of this red apple. And my red is going to look maybe a little earthier because I'm using the Venetian red than what the red looks in reality. So if you want to get more of that really true red, then you can use a Cad red light or a Cad red, just a Cad red medium. And then going back to my yellow shadow mix, we've got a little kind of triangle shape of shadow there. Okay, now really wiping that brush down. Since everything is so small, I'm really using it's a number 2. Okay, and then white and shadow. I'm just going to start with ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. Okay, and I think that ought to cut it, ought to do it. You know, sometimes that can feel like, oh, but that's so green. But once we get the clean white on there, it will start to make sense. And you can put a little touch of red in there. I would just be really careful if you do put a little touch of red, because it can go brown really fast, and brown on a clean porcelain white just doesn't ever really look right. Okay. And then also the blue stripe and the blue pattern will really make it make sense too. So I'm going to use some ultramarine blue, some alizarin crimson, and we're going to put on that really nice dark rich stripe that's underneath, making sure that we get some curve there. Same thing here, and I still need to curve my foot a little bit more so it has that looking down quality. There's kind of some pattern, I think, curving up here. It's very subtle, but I think I'll make it a little less subtle in my painting. I mean, at the end of the day, this is my painting, right? So I get to be in charge. I get to make all of the decisions. And then just going back to that darker cast shadow red, just to carve this drawing out a little more clearly here. Okay. And then let's get some, I'm just really wiping that out of my brush. Let's get some color for the green apple. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue, cad lemon, which is my cool yellow, my cool green yellow. We're going to make sure we get enough paint down, really nice and thick and juicy. And then behind the navel here, where I put in just kind of a big shape for the navel shadow. Okay. I always know, like, whenever I put in the light, especially at this scale, it's going to carve that shape down smaller and finer. So don't worry about getting it perfect right off the bat. Okay, I'm going to add in some more blue here, a little bit more cad yellow deep to get kind of a deeper green on the turning plane before we get into shadow. And I'm just going to blend those two colors, kind of wet into wet there, and then just kind of soften that into the shadow edge. Okay, and then wiping that out of my brush. We've got lemon yellow here. You would think it would just be pure lemon yellow, but this lemon is like a little bit richer and warmer, which I like. So I'm adding a little bit of cad yellow deep in there too. You just want to make sure that this light and bright goes down nice and thick enough, because it's going to dry a little bit darker and duller than what it looks like right now. So really lay it on thick. Okay. And flat, keep your brush flat to the surface. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that cad yellow deep. Again, this is kind of my transitioning color, goes a little bit darker in value. It's kind of in between the value and color of the light and shadow. And then we do have this little nub here that we need to kind of create that little shape of the nub. I wanted to get a little bit more light. Usually the little nub is so small that you don't really get a ton of light on it, but I do want a little bit. Now, there is kind of some yellow-green that's on the apple and shadow back there, so I'm going to take my darker green color, add a little bit more of cad yellow deep to it. It's going to look pretty green still against, this is basically like that light yellow green on the apple, but in shadow. So everything in shadow has to be a little darker, a little warmer for it to feel like it belongs in shadow. And then we have the little center of this apple, which will help tell us that this is an apple. So I've already got that dark red on my palette. And then down in the crevices, you know, where the fruit really, the edge of the fruit really meets the bowl, we get even darker down there. So again, going back to kind of that crimson type color, just going a little bit darker right on that edge, that last edge. Okay, I'm going to use a little palette knife here to get some of the highlights going. Now I position my light perfectly so that it perfectly to illustrate the form, right? To describe the form. So it's basically top left so that it really accentuates the top part of the form so my light is not too low, so that we can get more power out of these forms, more illusion of three-dimensionality here. Going back to my deeper yellow mix that I used on the transition zone to put in some beautiful reflected light into the underplane of this shadow. Reflected lights really liven the joint up, right? So if you don't turn on your reflected lights or don't get them strong enough in a light and shadow painting like this, it will just kind of feel like something is missing. Timer is mostly for me just to let me know, we gotta get cooking. Okay, usually like next to the navel, on these green apples, next to the little navel area, or like close, oops, just covered that up, darn. Close to shadow, you might see a little more of like a true green, like a richer true green. So I just made that with some blue and some cab lemon, but it had more blue in the mix. And then I accidentally covered up some of my shadow stuff, so we'll just bring that back a bit. Same thing on this side. I kind of lost some of my core shadow, the start of my shadow here with all of the reflected lights and blending. So it's like walking a tightrope, you maybe add in a little too reflected light or too much transition, and then have to bring back in your shadow shape. Okay, really cleaning my brush here and just going for some pure white, little tiny bit of lemon yellow. I feel like it's going to be reflecting, would make sense for it to be the rim of the bowl to be reflecting some of that yellow back to us. And then painting wet into wet, you're going to sometimes pick up, can you see that little bit of brown in there? Like it takes time, to really be able to practice and tell like, oh, I just picked up some of that brown. So I'll just kind of twist it off my brush knowing that I just picked some of that up so that I can get a clean load of paint again. Okay. And of course, this purple will be the most challenging, but that's a great painting over the edge. I really want to make sure I get the illusion of a great painting over the edge and not just purple running into white, So that means I've got to make sure I've got a strong, clear shape and really strong, clear overlap. Same thing with the lemon, make sure that shape of grape is overlapping in front of the lemon. Now, this is such a teeny tiny little painting, so I'm going to pull out my little barbecue skewer here, which is going to allow me to get more of a pinprick of light. Just really critical on grapes and berries, things like that you don't blend in the highlight too much. So what's going to turn these into grapes quite magically is getting that highlight and then the transmitted light moving through the grape. If you're struggling with grapes, there are some more simple grape exercises in your library as well. Okay, there is a little bit of light, so down here catching on the foot. Again, make sure you put that down thick enough. Number one, if you don't, it will, since there's wet paint down, it will just make a mess, right? So make sure that you do get it thick enough so that you don't just make a mess. And there is like a little bit of light here going up the center, which is helpful. Okay, I'm seeing some more reflected light from this apple on the underside of the bowl. So adding in some yellow here, some of my cadmium yellow. The cadmiums are so good for those reflected lights because they're really rich and warm. You just don't usually want to put them in totally thick and pure like what we did on the lemon, so you just kind of blend those in a little bit more. We're going to make our bowl a little bit more substantial on this side. And use paint, to draw edges, to get your drawing, get your edges. So don't be afraid to just paint wet into wet, push paint around, move it around. I mean, that's part of why I always use the phrase push paint around. Okay, so let's go over to this apple that's in light. First, I'm going to go to kind of this murky, kind of reddish brown color because I forgot to put in the shadow that would be inside the navel, really wiping that brush. Going back to adding in more lemon yellow. This time I'm kind of mixing a little bit into my warm lemon color and my green lemon color. My green apple color, sorry. Because this yellow is it's not the same as these other two yellows, right? It's not quite that yellow-green. It's not quite that yellow that's on the lemon either. So when you're painting similar colors, you really want to look around the rest of your setup. What have you already painted? So that you can more accurately judge the color. Now, like I said, I'm using Venetian red. I'm just going to use Venetian red pure here. There's no reason to overcomplicate the color mixture for the red that's on this apple, especially down here, close to shadow. It's kind of where we can get like a darker, deeper red. And then I'm going to add the Venetian red with the lemon yellow for the red that's in the light part. And I'm going to curve it with the form. Curve my strokes here to indicate the form. A little transition here just needs a little softening of edge. I think my red needs to be, the red in shadow needs to be richer, so I'm going to add some more alizarin crimson to it. It's a transparent color, so it really makes for some beautiful shadow mixtures. Makes your shadow just feel a little bit more luminous. Okay. And then same thing there, we just need a little bit of highlight action going on along the top. This time it's running horizontally like a wheel across the form because of the angle of the apple to the light. Okay. And I'm going to mix a little bit of the alizarin with my Venetian red to get kind of a deeper red right along this edge into transition. Much like the blue-green on the blue-green apple, the same effect would be happening on red apple. And then actually that color right there would be perfect for some of the glow. But might be a little too bright, so we'll add a little more crimson, a little more ultramarine blue to get it a little bit darker. I don't really want it that dramatic looking. But we do want to get in like some glow on the back side of these apples. And if you drag a little yellow in there, that's okay, because the yellow lemon is very bright, and so it makes sense that some of the lemon yellow would be reflecting into the back side of the grape as well. little glow there. I see a lot of glow and a lot of red blush on these back here. Maybe I'll make these a little bigger just to hold a little more space in this painting. This one, maybe I'll make this one a little more red as well. And then we have that beautiful lemon slice. I really want to wipe that dry out of my brush. I don't like to use a lot of medium, especially painting the lights, because then I have to really let the brush dry before I mix another color. And I like to go, go, go. So I added a little bit of white in here. And I want to make this grape a little smaller. It kind of became a huge mutant grape on steroids. But I am adding a little bit of white in here for the cut lemon. And actually for the rind, you need a really crisp edge. Just white if I can get it. Close, close, but no cigar. Where's that phrase from? Where did I get that from? That's a nice clean white. Okay. And then I'm going to come back in with kind of a greenish yellow. And I'm actually going to pull some of that paint off that I just put down. Okay, just to refine that rind edge. This grape in front of the lemon is super important. So I want to give, more of a grape highlight. And then remember that shadow white color, what was it? Blue, ultramarine blue, and yellow ochre. I want that a little bit, but it needs to be lighter. There we go. For, whenever these cut open lemons, they kind of have sort of like a cool grayish, I guess because it's see-through effect going on with them. And sometimes you can see those seeds in there, which I'm not seeing a lot of today, but maybe we can invent a little seed a little bit warmer. I think I see one right here. So, okay. Add in some more yellow for, I'm going to pretend like this lemon is leaking out some of its light, kind of a reflected light into the tabletop plane. You'll notice too that whenever I paint on the tabletop plane, I use horizontal strokes going with the plane. It's really important because your brushstroke direction can also tell the viewer the angle of the plane. So if I were to do a vertical stroke on this plane, it might get really confusing, or the perspective might start looking really distorted. Let me just carve out that little grape a little more clearly with some tabletop color. And then we did it up there where the lemon is reflecting into the shadow plane, so we want to do it down here as well for this apple. And sometimes you do go too far and like that, but that's okay. It's not a mistake. It's just an adjustment, right? So then you just come back in with a little more of that red. Now to keep all of our fruits from floating that are sitting on the ground plane, we want to make sure that we anchor them down with a fine cast shadow edge, like a flat horizontal cast shadow edge. So all of your round fruits should be flatter on the bottom, rounder on top. A little bit. Okay, everybody, I hope that this has been helpful to you. And as always, I'm wishing you happy painting happy learning, happy growing in every aspect of your art life journey. And I'm super excited to see your results in our private community group. So be sure to share your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, all of that in the Facebook group so we can all learn from each other and grow together. Okay, I'll see you there. Bye.